Despite the gravity of events and the resulting cataclysmic changes during the Great War, there were also moments of levity and humour. Here's a poem sent from the front by a Welsh soldier, a Private Maunder, to set the mood. This appeared in the Penarth Times. Now out here things are different and life is fancy-free. We have no butter on our bread or cow's milk in our tea. All we have to bother us are bullets, bombs and shells, bully beef and biscuits, and awful nasty smells.
That image was drawn by Herbert Samuel Thomas, affectionately known as Bert Thomas. He was from Newport, and it took him 15 minutes to sketch it, apparently, and it became one of the most popular cartoon images of the war. The Tommy taking a break for a smoke and saying, "Half a mo, Kaiser." It was used in a campaign that raised funds to send cigarettes to the troops, and in total, the Tobacco for the Troops campaign pulled in £250,000.
The satirical newspaper, the Armistice Times, was distributed throughout the British trenches and was eagerly looked forward to by the troops. It was a sort of forerunner to Private Eye and was produced, albeit irregularly, by members of the 12th Battalion Sherwood Foresters based at Ypres, who'd found an abandoned printing press in the town. Ypres. Y-P-R-S. Wipers. See what they did there?
A letter in the Armistice Times.
Dear Sir, whilst taking my early morning strolls, I have noticed the deterioration of the roads around Wipers. They're riddled with potholes, some of which are up to 20 feet deep. Doesn't the Wipers Town Council have enough money in its budget to tend to the area's roads properly? Attention is long overdue. Yours sincerely, A. Keen Walker.
Some Tommies in the trenches on the Western Front, somewhere in France, were filling sandbags to repair a shattered trench wall. Finally, in disgust, one said,
"If those Germans want to come to this country, why don't they come over and get it? We got it all shoveled in the bags for them to carry away. And the crazy part of it is, we poor fools come all the way from Cardiff to fill the bags for them."
A fake Paris was built out of wood and plasterboard to confuse the German bomber pilots. It had all the landmarks, and it was 15 miles away from the real city. It looked very realistic.
Until 1916, it was the rule that all members of the British Army had short hair and a moustache. King's Regulation Command Number 1695 stipulated,
"The hair on the head will be kept short. The chin and the underlip will be shaved, but not the upper lip."
It's not clear how far this order was rigidly enforced, and soldiers sometimes held moustache contests. Even after 1916, shaving was still required, and to appear stubbly was effectively a breach of regulation.
Here's a young German soldier with a magnificent handlebar moustache. Apparently he found this very uncomfortable when he had to wear his gas mask, and so he trimmed it down to a very small toothbrush type.
He looks familiar.
The soldiers developed their own terminology and slang, and many of the words are still in use today. Words that were common in British regional dialects suddenly had national recognition. For instance, Lancashire gave us binge.
The North Country gave us scrounge.
And London gave us clink. Almost all the languages that were in use in the various theatres of war contributed. From the Indian languages came blighty, which means foreign in Hindu.
Khaki comes from the Urdu word for dust.
From Arabic came bakshi.
From France we got camouflage.
And even the Germans contributed. They gave us pipsqueak after a small trench gun they used.
And Italy, they gave us scarpa.
During the freezing winter months, the officers told the soldiers to rub whale oil all over their bodies to keep them warm in the trenches.
And back in Britain, the Boy Scouts and Girl Guides played a number of vital roles. In London and the surrounding area, this included carrying and delivering messages for the British Secret Service. The Boy Scouts, who were MI5's first choice for this work, apparently found it hard to keep sensitive secrets. So British agents turned to the Girl Guides instead. Boy Scouts were actually paid to collect conchs, which apparently contained an ingredient used in explosives.
Feeding the men who were in the trenches during the First World War was some task. According to the soldiers on the front line, though, the biggest threat to life was not the Germans' bullets, but the appalling food.
Most despised was McConaughey, named after the company in Aberdeen that made this tin soup consisting of chunks of fatty meat and vegetables in thin gravy. It was said to be disgusting, especially cold.
A fighting soldier's daily rations include tinned meat known as corned beef. They had biscuits made from salt, flour and water. Now they were produced under the government contract by Huntley and Palmer's, which in 1914 was the world's largest biscuit manufacturer. The notoriously hard biscuits could crack teeth if they weren't soaked in tea or water. Other rations included the famously predictable plum and apple jam and the vitally necessary condensed milk.
If the troops were lucky, they got bacon a few times a week, which they'd usually cook carefully, taking care not to create smoke and attract the enemy's attention. Despite tales and rumours, the soldiers never resorted to eating rats, horse or dog. And by the end of 1916, flour became hard to come by, so bread was made from dried potatoes, oats, barley, and even pulverised straw.
The occasional arrival at the front of vats of stew called pan-packs was a cause for celebration. Parcels from home contained welcome tasty extras. Commercial organisations were quick to jump on the bandwagon of exploitation by attempting to include their products as treats for the soldiers. There was a daily rum ration for every soldier at the front as well. Drinking water was precious and scarce. It was transported in old petrol cans, so it tasted of petrol. And lime was often added to try and make it more palatable.
Unfortunately, this awful mix could cause stomach upsets, especially for the new recruits. The enemy knew exactly where to aim the guns first thing in the morning.
Commercially minded firms weren't slow in cashing in on the war for advertising their products. Sometimes a keen-eyed copywriter would spot a photograph in the press and realise that opportunity was knocking. Many reputable companies, some of them still household names today, were quick to find reasons, some flimsier than others, for persuading the populace that their products would be of indispensable use to the serving soldier or his family, whilst others, less scrupulous, exploited any link they could, however tenuous. Products as diverse as clothing, foodstuffs and cigarettes to gramophones, nerve pills and fountain pens were advertised. Despite this being a time of poverty and austerity, British businesses weren't slow in realising and exploiting commercial opportunities from the war.
Soldiers joked about the lice which infested their clothes. Now, the average soldier in the war had at least 20 lice on him. The record was 10,428, living on just one man.
I'm alive, and so is my shirt.
In 1916, British summertime was introduced to capitalise on daylight hours for outdoor work. It has remained with us.
Souvenir hunting became a mania for British soldiers. Trophies captured directly from the enemy were the most sought after. The German spiked helmet, the Pickelhaube, was the most prized.
Claims that war production was being hampered by drunkenness led campaigns to try and stop excessive drinking. Pub opening times were restricted and the alcohol content of beer was reduced. The no treating order made it an offence to buy a drink for others.
And some people still adhere to that law.
Possession of cocaine or opium became a criminal offence, and heroin, sold openly in the shops before the war as a cure for coughs and colds, became a banned substance.
Animals played important roles in the conflict. Almost 1 million horses were involved either in the cavalry or in pulling the huge guns, the ambulances and supply wagons. Gas from horse droppings could even be used to power lamps.
Dogs and homing pigeons were used in the trenches. They carried messages in capsules attached to their bodies. Hawks were used by both sides. They were trained to kill the pigeons. Dogs were also used to lay down telegraph wires. Both dogs and cats were used to try and keep down the rats. Sometimes the troops found ducks or chickens in the destroyed farms and kept them behind the lines for fresh eggs, sometimes meat. Exotic animals such as camels and elephants were used, and even glowworms and goldfish did their bit. After gas attacks, the gas masks were washed and rinsed, and if the rinsing water killed a goldfish, it meant the masks still had poison in them.
Soldiers from all over the world, France, America, Canada, South Africa, etc., served side by side with the British soldiers at the front. A cosmopolitan mix, which could sometimes be a bit confusing.
Halt! Who goes there?
Adele, 614 Corporal, Ceylon Rifles.
Oh, pass, friend. Halt! Who goes there?
Johnson, Otago, Marty Rifles, New Zealand Expeditionary Force.
Oh, pass, friend. Halt! Who goes there?
Shut man. When you're in business, what the hell's it got to do with you anyway?
Pass. Where's Smith? Late in March 1918, the Germans launched a major offensive which had the British reeling back in disarray. Marshal Sir Douglas Haig's special order of the day to all British and Empire forces shows how desperate the situation was. He famously wrote, "Every position must be held to the last man. There must be no retirement. With our backs to the wall and believing in the justice of our cause, each one of us must fight on to the end." When this historic message was read to the men of the 15th Welsh in their dugouts near Martinsa, there was a stunned, respectful silence for a few seconds, broken only by Private William Shanahan from Tennessee, who barely looked up from his card table with the words,
"Well, that's it, boys. Arts is trumps."
The average height of a recruit in 1914 would have been around 5'5" with anyone above 5'7" being classed as tall. There were many more that were shorter and smaller in stature than average, so much so that the War Office created bantam battalions for men between 5 feet and 5 feet 3 inches in height. The South Wales Borderers and the Welsh regiments did this.
For soldiers at the front, hygiene was a serious challenge. An officer of the Welsh Guards writes,
"Since the battalion came back from the line, one of my immediate duties is to give the men an opportunity to wash, be it in the sea, a lake, a river, or the baths, which to my mind aren't satisfactory. They consist of 2 vats, 10 feet by 10 feet, and filled to a depth of 2 feet. The water is changed every 2 hours, with only 1 vat going at a time. And they take 120 men an hour, so it means that 240 men bathe in the same water. They say there's not sufficient hot water to do any more." I checked the washing of their clothes as well. They first go through a disinfector, and then dipped in creosote, so they should be all right.
On the 28th of September 1918, the Allies attacked the Hindenburg Line. It was a pivotal event in the history of the Great War. At the last minute, however, the plans of attack went through a sudden and considerable change. The replanned attack went ahead successfully, and just over 6 weeks later, Germany surrendered and the armistice was signed. Years later, in 1931, one of the soldiers in that attack thought back over the events and took the story of that last-minute change to the newspapers. The government of the day confirmed that the plan of attack changed because the Allies had captured top-secret documents giving detailed information on every German machine gun post, trench mortar battery and fortified position on the Hindenburg Line. Apparently these maps had been brought back after a daring raid behind the lines by an unknown British soldier. The Sunday Express of November 1931 ran a story entitled "The Man Who Ended the Great War. Where is he?" A reward of £5,000 was pledged to the mystery officer and a search began. That search was nationwide. Leads were followed up and more often than not the trail went cold. One evening in November 1931, there was a telephone call to Neath Police Station. A reporter was inquiring whether an Ernest Rollings worked there. He did. The search was over. The quiet, reluctant hero had been found. Edward James Rollings was born in Hereford, and in 1913 he joined the Glamorgan Constabulary. He was serving at Maesteg when war broke out, and he joined up. It was on the 8th of August 1918 that the Allied tanks broke through the lines near Villers, and Edward Rollings, a young lieutenant, led a daring raid on the German HQ in a farmhouse at Franéville, 9 miles behind the German front line. They captured the village and combed the farmhouse for documents. Rollings snatched up the papers he found lying around, stuffing them into an old sandbag, little realizing that among them were detailed plans for the defense of the Hindenburg Line. After 3 hours in enemy territory, the little group returned to their own lines, capturing 200 prisoners along the way, and the plans were sent to HQ, where their importance was quickly realized and acted upon. Lieutenant Rollings was wounded in the head soon afterwards, and this ended his active service. He rejoined the Glamorgan Constabulary, serving in Goenka, Girwen and Dastalavera, before transferring to the newly formed Neath Borough Police, where he was promoted to sergeant in 1926. As was so typical of soldiers who had served in the conflict, he never spoke about it. And then suddenly the newspaper story of 1931 made him famous. He was presented with a cheque for £5,000 and a scroll in a silver casket. In 1932 he was made a freedman of Neath, considered by many as the man who ended the Great War. A real hero. One of the techniques used by both sides was to dig tunnels under no man's land and, if possible, under the enemy's trenches. Deep underground in these tunnels they placed mines which exploded, leaving enormous craters. There would have been a huge number of casualties. Rumour has it that the biggest explosion of this type was heard and felt in Britain. That's probably apocryphal, but the damage and the carnage was immense. For the Allies, the Royal Engineers undertook this work, and in their ranks were many Welshmen, valuable because of their mining expertise and experience. This scenario is from the writings of Bernard Adams, who was a lieutenant in the Royal Welsh Fusiliers. The setting, somewhere in the frontline trenches, April 1916. His batman's name is Davis, his colleague's name is Clark. To work out the geography of the trenches, the soldiers typically referred to areas using names like the Fort and 76th Street and Gordon Alley. RE is an abbreviation for Royal Engineers. The short piece of poetry has great poignancy because it was found on the wall of a tunnel dug by the Allies, deep under no man's land, during the Battle of the Somme. Nobody knows who wrote it. It reads, "If in this place you are detained, don't look around you all in vain, but cast your net and you will find that every cloud is silver-lined."
I'd been in with the Colonel, and he showed me on the map where the mine would be going off. It was going to be blown that night at 6. It was deep under no man's land. One of the Royal Engineer officers was there, name of Armstrong, I think, and he pointed out where the edge of the crater should be. And we discussed where to put our Lewis guns and prepare the bombers. We had the ammunition, the tools, the sandbags, and the stakes. We were as well prepared as we could be. I left the Colonel and went up 76th Street. It was 5:30. It was half an hour before the mine was due to be blown. I realised that I'd been rushing about and had forgotten my tea. So I sent Davis back and told him to bring up a mug of tea and something to eat. No sooner had he disappeared than I met a party of 6 REs covered from head to foot in white chalk dust. And the 2 leading men were carrying canaries in cages. They held them out in front, like you hold out a lantern on a muddy road. The canaries were used to detect gas fumes. They certainly weren't kept as pets. I reached the fort, and my watch showed me that it was 10 to 6. It was a warm evening, early in April, and there was a deathly calm. God, these hushes are hateful and unnatural, like the pause between lightning and the thunder. And worst of all was the stillness. The sun set in a blaze of red, and in the south, the evening star glowed in a deepening blue. What would have happened by the time day returns with its full light and sense of security? I suddenly heard Davis at my elbow, got my mug of tea. So, with my mug in one hand, Clark found me as he came along at that moment, looking, as he told me afterwards, exactly like the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland. Clark, what's the time?
I made it 2 minutes to 6.
Well, we go up at 6 o'clock. Who put the sugar in this tea, Davis? Was it you? Question was never finished. There was a faint pop from goodness knows where, and a horrid shudder. The earth shook. I set my legs apart to keep my balance, and it felt as if the whole ground were going to be tilted up. The tea splashed all over the fire step as I hastily put it down, and then I looked up. There was nothing. What had happened? Then, over the sandbanks appeared a great green meadow, slowly, taking its time, not hurrying, a smooth, curved dome of grass, heaving up and up and up like a rising cake. And then, like a cake, it cracked visibly with bursting brown seams. But still the dome rose, towering 10, 20 feet above the surrounding level, and then with a roar, the black smoke hurtled into the air, followed by masses of pink flame creaming up into the sky, giving out a bonfire heat, and lighting up the twilight with a lurid glare. Magnificent.
Wonderful.
And then they all ducked to avoid the shower of mud and dirt and chalk and pattered down like hail. "The mud's all in your tea, sir," said Davis. I was peering over into a vast chasm, where 2 minutes ago had been a smooth meadow full of buttercups and toadstools. Suddenly, I heard Sergeant Hayman shouting in the distance.
"The trench has fallen in, sir. You can't get along here at all."
So the night's work began. It was a week or so later that Clark and I sat down in the dugout to a tea of hot buttered toast, jam, and some cakes. We'd been in the reserve for a few days and were due to go back at the line of dawn the next day. "Well, Clark, how goes it, man?"
I've just been down a mine shaft with that RE officer, I forget his name, the fellow with the glasses.
I know him, Armstrong, I think. Did you go right down and along the galleries? Frankly interesting. I always mean to go, but some I don't. Well, what about it?
Well, by Jove, it's wonderful. It's all as white as snow, dazzling white. I never realised that before, although you see the REs coming out all covered with white chalk dust. First of all, you go down 3 or 4 ladders. It's awfully tricky work. I looked down, and I saw a dim light miles below. Oh, it gave me a turn. It's a terribly long way down, and I was alone with the RE officer. He got ahead of me.
Have some more tea, go on.
Well, down there, it's fearfully interesting. I didn't go far up the gallery where they're working, because you can't easily pass along. No room for 2 men. But the RE officer took me along a gallery that's not being worked, and there, at the end of it, was a man. He was alone, in the darkness, sitting, listening. Then I listened through his stethoscope thing. It's like a doctor's stethoscope, and by it, you can hear underground sounds, 100 yards away, as clearly as if they were 5 yards off. And I could hear a Bosch working, as plainly as anything. Good heavens, it sounded about a yard off, yet they told me it was 40 yards. By Jove, it was weird. Pick, pick, pick. I thought it must be our fellows really, but theirs makes a different sound apparently, and not a bit the same. But you know, that fellow sitting there, alone, as we went away and left him, he looked around at us with staring eyes, just like a hunted animal, to sit there for hours on end, listening. Of course, while you hear them working, it's all right, they won't blow. But if you don't hear them, my God, I wouldn't like to be an RE, it's an awful game.
Fascinating. I must go down. As I spoke, the ground shuddered and the tea things shook. That's a mine.
I wonder if it's ours or theirs.
I saw Hills this afternoon and he said nothing about a mine. I'm sure he would have if we'd been going to send one up.
No, I bet it's a Bosch mine.
It was a German mine. And it had caught our REs this time. All through the night, they tried to rescue those fellows from the Royal Engineers from our mine gallery. But dozens had been killed, many of them gassed by mine gas, which is the same as that encountered in coal mines. One man who was rescued was brought out barely conscious on a stretcher. The doctor ordered him to lie still for half an hour. Poor man. He was so terrified that he struggled to his feet, shouting and screaming and tried to run away. Fell dead of heart failure. I got snatches of sleep, but always there was a sound of the stretcher bearers carrying the dead and wounded past our dugout to the dressing station. Several times I went out, but there was nothing I could do. It was my duty to sleep. We were going up the line the following morning. Sleep doesn't always come to order. Full dawn we stood to. We were just bringing the last of the casualties to the dressing station. There were men standing about, silent as usual, in the presence of death. Germans who'd blown that mine at tea time were doubtless sleeping the sleep of men who worked well and earned their rest. Here, they knew nothing of it. They would never know how many they'd slain. Remember the night Scott and I had watched our big mine go up? Wonderful, we'd said. Magnificent, we'd said. No. No.
Bernard Adams died of wounds received in battle on February the 27th, 1917. the long hard war is over, and God's peace reigns over all. What a joy it will be to see you, knowing that whatever befall, we shall always be together. That means everything to me. Even now, amid thoughts of battle, these sweet pictures come to me. The letters to and from those serving in the forces during the First World War were for the individuals and families alike more precious than gold. Over 12 million letters a week were handled by the post. They served so many purposes, not least for those at home where they provided the eagerly awaited assurance that the soldier was still alive. The letters were often censored, and it was forbidden to write letters or official war diaries in Welsh because the censors couldn't understand it. The women at home lived in fear of the telegram or the official letter that could come at any time, informing them of their loved one's death. It was telegrams for officers, letters for the other ranks.
Equally as bad as the official letter was the return of the man's personal belongings. The officers bought and paid for their own kit, and if they were killed in action, it was rightfully considered the property of the next of kin, and whenever possible, duly returned. Sometimes these could be upsetting beyond comprehension. Blood-soaked tunics with bayonet slashings and bullet holes visible, shirts dark and stiff with blood, all included. Widows dealt with these things in their own way. Some were displayed as they were to proudly show the bravery of the deceased, and others were immediately burnt.
Here is a disturbingly sad extract from the writings of a young Welsh soldier, describing a scene in no man's land where, as was often the case, and although wrong in so many ways, soldiers of both sides went through the belongings of the dead, looking for weapons, ammunition, and of course, valuables.
The personal papers had been taken out of the pockets of the dead, German and British. And since they were of no use, they'd been thrown literally to the wind, where they blew around like dead leaves. Letters, photographs of wives, mothers, sweethearts, or perhaps little babies born whilst father was at war. Precious, worthless possessions, scattered in the slime of no man's land.
Thousands of soldiers who served in the Great War left no descendants, and as their immediate family grew old and eventually passed away, so did the memories of these brave men. For some, the letters they sent or received were kept and treasured, so providing a lasting record. Countless others have slipped away in the mists of time. Here are some letters about, to and from Ben Newt, a young soldier from a loving family in Neath. They show that despite all that was happening, this was a chivalrous age wherein politeness, manners, and a sense of duty were paramount. They make poignant reading. Aged 20 in 1914, Ben joined the Welsh Regiment in the early months of the war and transferred to the Medical Corps. He served in Malta, Egypt, and the Far East. Ben had met a friend, a girl called Nell, in the most respectable of circumstances. She was a young lady from Torquay. Although the relationship was nothing more than friendship between two lonely people in a troubled world, Ben's mother found it difficult to be approving, and they both found it endearingly difficult to truly express their feelings. Mother understandingly loved and missed Ben so very much.
Creswell Road, Neath. My dear son, I received your letter this morning with your photo. You look in good health, just like you used to. I was glad to have it and to hear that you are still in Malta. I wished often that you could have something to do indoors, for I think that you have done quite enough for your country. I can't say that I I agree with you writing that young lady in Torquay. All her kindness to you. You can pay her back by sending her a little present and then thanking her for her kindness. To write to a girl and a stranger, and for her to write to you, well, it's not wise by no means. With the greatest love to you, Ben, Mother.
Alexandria, Egypt. My dear parents and sisters, I have received you a letter, also Father's parcel enclosing tobacco, cigarettes and writing paper, for which I thank you very much. I've not received the parcel of socks which you sent. Neither have I had Mr. Dennis and Mrs. Parker's cigarettes, but thank them for me all the same. I am sorry to hear that Mother doesn't agree with me writing to that girl in Torquay, but I can assure you that she is perfectly respectable, and that she's not a total stranger, because I have been introduced to her. I wouldn't write to her if I thought she was other than respectable. I'm glad to say that I'm quite well. I must close now because it's 8 o'clock and I have to go up to the officer's mess with a spraying apparatus for killing flies. So you can see what valuable work I am doing for my king and country. I've had a letter from my resolvent friend in the 39th Field Ambulance. I hear that many of my old pals have been wounded and 2 of the replacements have been killed. I wish I was back with them. Too monotonous here. Best of love to you all. Yours ever affectionately, Ben.
My dear son, I received you a letter yesterday. We're also very glad to hear that you are quite well and looking forward to a spread at Christmas. We spent Christmas very happily. Of course, we thought about you all day. We could not do otherwise. Oh dear Ben, you mentioned in your letters about coming home. Well, as much as we would like to see you, all I must say is you're pretty safe now, and well, I'd rather not risk the journey. I feel that very soon you will, I hope, be home to stay. Of course, I need not ask you for forgiveness for me saying this, because, well, you understand your mother's good wishes towards your safety. I had a very real dream lately. It was night time, and there was a knock came to our door. Your father got to the bedroom window and tapped at it and called me. Oh, here's Ben! And I could hear you walk through the passage so plainly. And then, when I woke, it was all over. Dear Ben, I hope that you will soon be, and that I shall never have to say goodbye to you again. Your father will get that book for the young girl in Torquay this week. Very curious about her. Why should she send you parcels? I hope that you are not in any way deceitful towards her, for I would not wish you to do anything that is not right towards any girl, no more than I would wish one of your sisters to be done by so. So mind that for certain, as I have heard of wrong done by soldiers. I would prefer to tell the girl not to send me anything if I were in your place, unless you like her as you should. I'm your mother, and I will correct you as no one else will do. Oh, dear Ben, you will say, oh, there's mother again. Oh, may God bless you still, and keep you a good boy, safe and well, until we meet again. Your loving mother.
My dear parents and sisters, I have received Mother's letter of the 6th, for which many thanks. You mentioned that as much as you may wish to see me, you would prefer me not coming home on leave at the present time in consequence of the activities of enemy submarines. I quite understand. I certainly had to smile when I read Mother's tirade. But in between the lines, I read a deep suspicion of me. I am sorry she should think so of me, but I can assure her, and my word to Mother is always sincere, that there is not the least cause for any anxiety on her part. I've only spoken to the girl once, and that was by an appointment jokingly made by a pal of mine and a pal of hers. The appointment was to be kept outside the post office in Torquay. As she'd been to Wales, we talked to this country for about 5 minutes. And then, as a friend of hers came along to speak to her, I cleared off. She told me that she would send me cigarettes when I left England. True to her word, she did send me parcels. Out of a spirit of patriotism only. She's a sweetheart in France. We do not know each other except by correspondence. I too know that some rotten things have been done by soldiers, but I give you my word of honour that no one can say a single word against me. Sisters of my own. I'm most jealous of them. I treat all girls I ever had anything to do with the utmost courtesy and respect, as I would wish chaps would do towards mine. And they need have no worry about my association with that girl at Torquay, or any other one. The weather here is extremely cold now. It's been snowing for the last 5 days. I'm very comfortable myself, as I have a fire going in here all day. But I pity the poor chaps on the line. My best of love to you all. It was very affectionately, Ben.
Mother needn't have worried about Ben's relationship with the girl from Torquay, whose name, by the way, was Nell. Some weeks later, Nell wrote to Ben and told him that her fiancé had been killed in the trenches. She was heartbroken. Her whole life had fallen apart. We don't know what happened to her, but we do know that she and Ben never met again. The longed-for sound of Ben's footsteps echoing in the passage of his home in Neath was never heard again, and Mother didn't get to welcome back her beloved son. Ben contracted malaria and died in Palestine in 1918, aged 24. As the autumn of 1918 turned to winter, Germany and her allies realized they could not possibly win the war. The German Navy had gone on strike and refused to carry on fighting. The leaders of the German military forces and the populace realized the situation was hopeless. Kaiser Wilhelm abdicated on the 9th of November 1918. On the 11th of November at 5 a.m., the armistice was signed in a railroad carriage at Compiègne. The ceasefire was effective from 11 a.m. on the 11th of November 1918, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month.
Just outside the village of Debaugen in Monmouthshire, at Kilguruk, is the Church of the Holy Cross. Buried in the churchyard is able seaman Richard Morgan, who died aged 26 on Armistice Day, while serving aboard the HMS Garland. He tragically drowned after a boat capsized. Welshman Richard Morgan was the last British sailor to die before the war officially ended at 11 a.m. that morning.
On the Western Front, the official diary of the Welsh Guards has this stark entry on the 11th of November 1918.
News has reached the battalion that an armistice has been signed. Hostilities will cease on the whole front as from November the 11th at 11 o'clock. The Allied troops will not, until further order, go beyond the line reached on that date and at that hour. That is all.
The manner in which the Welsh troops received the news of the armistice was remarkable. Routine continued without any change, although there was a slight alteration in the nature of the work. The parades were suddenly of a more ceremonial nature, and greater attention was given to dress and smartness. The Welsh Guards upped camp and marched for the Belgian town of Villers-sur-Nicole. The strictest discipline was observed. Full regulation kit was carried, not a single man fell out. The battalion arrived on November the 20th and was met by the municipal band. One Welsh officer wrote, "We were treated to the wine of victory, which had been concealed from the Germans under the foundations of houses, in the gardens, in the fields, and now every Belgian who had anything of the kind found a spade and dug it up. Here was real feasting and rejoicing. Girls danced with us in the square. No Belgian could do enough for us. It was a genuine welcome, a heartfelt expression of thanks for deliverance." The rejoicings continued for 4 days and ended with a banquet on the evening of the 23rd. The victorious Welsh marched triumphantly into Germany at precisely 8:39 a.m. on December the 13th, 1918. At long last, the fighting was over.
The Great War was so terrible that when it was over, it was believed to be the war to end all wars. According to some sources, at the end of 4 years of fighting from August 1914 to November 1918, there were as many as 17 million dead, countless more wounded, and more lives affected than we can ever imagine. 32 countries were involved in the conflict, communities depleted of their young men. Villages and towns in the regions where battles had raged were terribly damaged. Some on the Western Front disappeared completely. Were there any lessons learnt? Were there any positive facets? There were significant advances in aviation technology and medicine, not least trauma and plastic surgery. But at what cost?
In Wales, the loss of life had devastating effects, especially in the north, where men had enlisted in huge numbers after the slate industry had been declared non-essential. Around 273,000 Welshmen went off to see active service, and an estimated 40,000 died during the conflict, with countless tens of thousands more injured. The youngest to die from Wales was 14-year-old George Lewis from Vale Street in Barry. He was the mess boy aboard SS Baruta, a defensively armed steamship. On the 6th of August 1918, 8 miles northwest of Calais, she was either torpedoed or she hit a mine. We'll never know for certain, and sank with the loss of all hands.
The First World War has passed out of living memory, but for those that fought, those that died, those that suffered, those forever scarred, those that lost loved ones, those in the communities ravaged by the hostilities, men and women, must all be remembered. In Kipling's words from his poem Processional, written in 1897, lest we forget.
The Cenotaph in London is the scene every year for a poignant memorial service held on Remembrance Sunday. Such was the outpouring of sentiment in the aftermath of the First World War that it was built in 1920 and designated the United Kingdom's official National War Memorial. The Cenotaph, by the way, is an empty tomb erected in honour of a person or persons whose remains are elsewhere, not to be confused with war memorials. There are only 2 cenotaphs in mainland Britain. The one is famously in London's Whitehall, and the other is in Aberdare.
There are a number of small, thankful villages in Britain. These villages were so named after the First World War because every man who went off to serve returned safely. One such is in Colmanston in the Vale of Glamorgan. The road sign declares that it's a thankful village.
Memorials, official and private, many and varied, were erected on the battlefields of the various theatres of war and in the home nations of those it served. Plaques listing the names of the fallen were put up in towns, cities, chapels, churches, schools and workplaces. Individuals and organisations created and donated everything from buildings, parks and libraries to musical instruments, paintings, books and Bibles in memory of the fallen. They must be looked after, appreciated and remembered.
An extract now from Lawrence Binion's poem For the Fallen, written in Cornwall in 1914, ironically before much of the horror and senseless killing of the Great War had happened. They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.